Alrighty. Let's make sure there's a recording. Very good. Yeah, so welcome to our first homework for animators. This is an animation obstacle course, right? Now, if you press Alt-V, you can see everything moving. And I've laid it out like this, right? All the green stuff is stuff that I've animated. Everything in the blue column is stuff that you're going to animate. Or I should say row, because that's horizontal. Yeah, so everything in the blue you're going to animate. And you'll notice that some of it is already animated, right? And it's animated sadly, right? Now, the top's not flawless, right? I did this pretty quickly, but basically, I'm setting this as a guideline, right? We have very slow, even movement on this animation. You pop open, this is the UV editor. Get out of here. We don't need that. Let's open up Windows Animation Editor. I'm holding space to bring up this menu, by the way. Animation Editor, Graph Editor, right? Now, your instinct, once you see this graph editor, is to be, disgusting. Who wants to see this graph editor? Who wants to mess around with this? But let me tell you something. I do, because there's literally problems in 3D animation that you can't solve if you don't understand this graph editor. And yeah, you need to work with it. It's going to take some time to overcome the learning curve of the graph editor, right? It's going to be annoying. But stick with it, and you'll eventually understand it. It works like this, right? Every single object that's moving, right? You open up its channel box. Let's press Alt-V, and you can see that I have all of my channels, my attributes, open in here, right? Translation is the world position of this object, right? Rotation, that is 3 angles of rotation to describe it, and you'll run into some problems. And then, of course, scale, right? 0.66 scale. Oh my gosh, this is the most demonic scale I've ever seen for a cube. Oh, frick. Well, all right. So, basically, your graph editor works the same way, except it splits each of those channels, each of those attributes into its own curve, and then every single frame, right? See this yellow line? This is the frame number that we're currently on. You can see that my timeline is updating as well, right? And every frame, it samples this curve. Maya looks into this graph and looks at that exact intersection, right? See how this value is intersecting right there on frame 24 at a value of, like 20.75, right? Negative 20.75 on this little y-axis there, right? And you can see negative 20.664. That's that value right here. That's that intersection. So that's how it's sampling that curve every single frame of your animation. And keep this open because it's going to be useful in solving problems. But right now, I'm not concerned with the graph editor as much. I'm more concerned with just the visual timing of it, right? And you'll look through all this, right? So cube, very boringly, slows in and slows out of each position that it's in on that x-axis. Let's keep it confined to the x-axis for now, because if you add another dimension in there, it's going to get a little bit more wild. If you want to, then that's fine. Go for it. Go for it. Now let's look at our sphere, right? Just a bouncing ball, classic bouncing ball. Not much is happening here. I would do another slow, easy interpolation there, but I want you guys to do this from the start. So just make 2 keys on there. It's already got them set up for you. Just make one in the middle and then spice it up. Add that squash, add that stretch. Now, squash and stretch on the cube is going to be a little bit more difficult, but let's do some squash and stretch on that. And then this is basically a very elementary rig for a torso, right? Because I see I'm going to see it in this class as well, but I see it every time I do a class. People move characters like this bottom one. They just grab that waist and move it forward, right? Now, it's great for positioning, right? But look at how much more life the one on top has. Look how much more character it has. Look at that. Like, you're activating every single piece of that spine. Think of these other controls as a spine on its movement, right? And that's how we move in real life. If you're doing anything and you're moving around, your spine is going to be contorting, twisting, maybe not as much as this top one, but it'll be doing it in a small amount, you know, and we need to capture that, otherwise your animation is going to suffer, right? Now, same for this one. Same exact thing, right? You can see that I keep the torso much more rigid on that top one. I add a little bit of overshoot once it gets to that pose and settle, right? It gets there earlier as well than the bottom one. Both of them do, actually. But yeah, so please, for these two torsos, experiment with activating all of the controls. I'll go into that more. But just make it spicy. You got to have texture to your pieces. This goes for pretty much anything in art. You have to add texture, not like a texture map or anything. That's going to be for the modelers, you know. But like every piece can have some detail, some fine detail to it that adds texture to the pacing or the piece, right? And we want to get that. We want to capture that. All right, this last one, very important for animators. They call this an IK/FK switch, and you'll notice that I don't change any of the keys on this control, on that top one. I just set this wrist to a different setting that makes it stick to that wall. That's how you're going to do any contact. If I see any of you not animating contacts in IK, I'm going to publicly roast you in front of the class. It's going to be very embarrassing. No, not really. I mean, I'll call it out, but yeah, like you gotta switch to IK if you're doing a contact. All right. So let's go back to the cube. Let's do a walkthrough of this. Right. Let's spice this cube up. I'm gonna go quick through this. Again, keep your eyes on the graph editor. So I want this to sort of, like in the top one, I have like a little bit of anticipate back where it's kind of hinging on that little bottom corner. What if I do like a little squash at the beginning, right? So a nice way that I go about animating, you know, a pause is like there's a few ways, right? I could go to a halfway point or just any further key in here and move it back, right? Notice that my timeline automatically added that key for me, and that's because I have auto key on. But until you get used to auto key, I want you guys to be in the mindset of like every time you move or set a key, like a main pose key, press S once you do it on the object, on whatever object you're animating. Press S. That's you'll see result 10. It's set 10 channels of data right there, all of them right there. And now you'll notice we pause and then it goes out, right? And then it goes back. I want it to have a little bit of like see this top cube, it stops there. Let's do that, right? So we can, again, we can either just manually move it, or we can right click, we can scrub over, right click copy, right click paste, boom, you'll see that curve update in our graph editor. Additionally, if I undo that, you can drag select over the key, and be very careful about this, right? You can do Control C, and then you can do Control V. See it pasted right there. If I do Control C, Control V in this window, right? See, I was doing that in the graph editor. If I do that in this window, that's going to ruin my scene, because if you have a rig selected, something like this one further along, and you do Control C, Control V, it's going to copy and paste that entire spine into your scene. Again, you'll have a duplicate of the character. You're going to want to quit and cry. So don't do that. Control C, Control V is only for this window. You have to make sure, like, see how there's no highlighting on the outside of this little square? That means that I'm not really in that window. I have to left click in that window. See it appear right there? Sorry, it's on this right here. You see, like, watch this. As I click in there, you'll see a faint gray line appear. It's not. It probably is not going to show up in this capture because I don't know. We'll see. But oh wait, no, it's still over here. Okay, no, you can see when it updates though. I usually just left click in this window. But yeah, so just make sure you click in there and then Control C, Control V, and you'll be good. Okay, so how do we go about spicing this up again, right? So I showed you one method of adding a delay on there is you just move the cube. One that I really like, though, is to scrub to, like, right after it starts moving, right? See how you get a little bit of faint movement? I'm just going to press S, right? And I have that key on my timeline, right? I have all my channels keyed as well. But if I could just go in, and then if I hold Shift and middle click drag to the right, it's going to extend that time. And then if I let go, boom, look at that. See that? See how the timeline updates? So I like to do that. If you want to do this on the timeline, let's undo the key. So you'd go to whatever frame you want to extend, right? And press S, so you have a key locking down that position at this time, right? You're locking down this position at this time, and you have this position at frame 1. So if you wanna add a pause, you need to increase the time between these keys, right? You need to put more drawings in there, right? So if you hold Shift, you can highlight sections on your timeline. I'm gonna highlight just an individual key, and then you see that there's 4 arrows, right? So the outside are to scale time, right? See how it's scaling up that time that I have selected? The inside ones are to shift time over left and right. Right? So I can just shift left click that key, and then I'll left click drag on that timeline. I find editing time like this is a little bit easier on here, but for a more complex character, sometimes you just got to go to that graph editor, select all the controls, and then go select all the keys in your graph editor and extend it that way, right? So we have that. That's still not snappy enough for me. Also, I really want that pause in there, so let's get that going. Let's extend this a little bit more. Let's have it, let's see, so it's going right there. Let's see how that works. So Alt V is to play. Okay, so that's looking better. So see, just by like spicing up the timing of a simple movement, it automatically adds a lot of feel to that piece, right? I want you guys to think of this as like a sort of pelvis for your character, right? I want you to think of it as like the placement of a wrist, right? Because I see a lot of students do that default slow in, slow out, boring interpolation on the graph, right? Don't do that, you know? Like, this needs to be animated for a reason, right? And natural things in the world don't move like that, right? You can get a lot of appeal just out of retiming the movement of something like that. And I want you to really translate that idea into your full-bodied character animations in the future, right? So I also think that we could go for a little bit of scale, right? Let's scale that up. I'm just going to keep it on one plane for now. And then I'm also going to move it up to correct for the contact on the bottom. I want to make sure that we got a good contact on that ground there. And then, so this is also, I want to pull this back and squish it, right? Because I spread it upwards. By doing that, I'm distorting the volume of it. It's going to appear off model. And then, so it's kind of squeezing back. And let's see how this looks. I might have to, so see how it like, before it reaches the fastest part right here, this should be the most squeezed down and extended part of the animation, right? That's what squash and stretch illustrates. It conveys motion and speed, right? It conveys an object moving with motion and speed, right? So we want to make sure that we get that correct. And let's see how this looks. So that's pretty good. The timing needs to adjust, though, big time. So I'm going to retime this. I'm going to add a little bit of time there. Let's see how this ends up looking. Yeah, so look at that. And then we kind of, the scale gets a little bit messed up here. I want this to be, I feel like frame 23 is when it's going fastest. I'm just looking at the spacing between the frames. So 23 should be the one having that most extreme scale, right? So 23, let's go to my scale curves. I'm just gonna left click, drag, and there we go. So now we have scale. You can see this is where it's completely like stretched out. We want to move this over a little bit, right? So I'm gonna drag select over these. I find it's always easier to drag select rather than like shift clicking each individual key. I just drag select. And then I'm gonna press W for move to do the move tool. You want to move these around on the graph, right? And then I'm gonna hold shift, middle click, and drag to the left. Boom. See how it's scaling up to that proper scale on the correct frame. And then let's do some, let's see, it actually feels pretty good with that tangent. Let's try changing the tangents. Let's talk about tangents a little bit, right? So up at your graph editor, you have a bunch of different interpolation types, right? This one is a custom one. You'll notice that it's not highlighting any of these. This is auto, right? I use auto for probably like 80% of my tangents. Let's say 70%. Auto is great at keeping good contacts. It's great at faking some nice rounded movement. But if you want super round movement, like let's look at like something like this. Actually, wait, no, let's get all of our curves in here. Specifically translate X. So like see these two keys right here, auto tangents are gonna make that a lot more snappy. I do like this nice fast stop that it comes to by default, so I'm probably gonna keep that stretched out like that. If you go here and use weighted tangents, you can start pulling these around and stretching that out even further, but be careful for getting like weird little kinks in your graph like that. You don't want that. But yeah, I'm probably gonna leave it like that. But if you wanted like some overshoot in between here or make it nice and smooth, you could do spline tangents. See that? So spline, that's, you can see auto. It does that smoothness, but then when it reaches two keys that are the same, it's gonna flatten it out, right? However, spline is gonna do it's going to do overshoot in there. It's going to make this as smooth as possible. I use this for nice graceful movements that need more circular movement, right? These ones are clamped tangents. I find that they, like, auto just kind of does clamped better, you know? So I just do auto. Linear is the enemy of a lot of animation, but sometimes you need to use it, right? I'll use linear for, like, on the ball bounce, right? To make a nice impact, right? Because it comes to that sharp angle. Then I'll usually break the tangents and start modifying them individually. Then we have flat again. I just use auto tangents for that, right? You'll notice that, like, if you have like an actual curve, you start to get this sort of stepped effect. See how like it should be smoothly interpolating through here? You get this stepped effect right there. I rarely use this for anything really. I just use auto because auto does its job a little bit better. Stepped tangents. This is like flat to the extreme because it goes flat, 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 and then it warps to the next position. You can see that see it just warping through space and time. That's not what we want. We don't want that. That is a good method to work with for blocking. A lot of people use that for blocking out their entire scene. They bring it to a really polished state with just these stepped tangents, and then when they click automatic tangents or spline, it just looks so good, you know? So that's a completely valid way of working. I want you to know that, but you just need to know these tangent types, right? So back to what we were talking about. I want to go back to that super, there we go, exaggerated curve right there. I love that. Also a little detail that's important. We're going to go into this actually, we'll cover this in the ball. We'll cover this in ball. Don't worry about it. But yeah, so let's look at our animation again. And we're getting a little bit of, clipping is what they call it. Clipping / penetration. It's going through the ground there. We don't want that. We don't want that. We want that to stay nice on the surface. Notice that my curve right here or my cube right here is still not on the surface anyways, right? So I'm going to go back to this, and I'm going to just nudge that down on Y. Boom, got a nice curve. I'm going to, oh shoot, what's the default key for this? All right, yeah, comma and period are going to go to your next key in your timeline. And I usually just do passes by going through my whole animation on my main keys like this, and then I'll make these macro corrections. Like I need this to be perfect on all those keys right there. So let's move this up. And then you'll get a little bit of bounce back. Let's change the tangents to auto. There we go. See how that fixed that up most of the way. This one's still a little bit problematic. We might have to just do one key to make that contact perfect. And that's coming from this curve being so exaggerated right there. Or sorry, not that one. It'd be one of the scales. Yeah, it's coming from this curve being so exaggerated. But I like that exaggeration. It feels good in the animation. See that? So that's what I want you to do with the cube. You don't have to do exactly what I've done. Like I've had students do like a bounce and then like a slide. I've had people do like a spin into that last position. I just want you to spice it up getting there, and I want you to spice it up getting back to that default position, right? That's that one. All right, so now on to sphere jumping, right? So basically I have my sphere in the background, and let's just add a key at 40. That is like our contact. You'll notice it's like the default size right there. And then let's make a jump, right? So I'm going to go halfway between my end and my start of that leap, and I'm just going to get some height on there, right? Let's get some height. And look at that. It looks so boring and sad. So boring and sad. So let's spice it up, right? Let's add some anticipation down. I'm going to put it inside the ground, right? I'm going to squash it with scale. I'm squashing that on the y-axis. I'm spreading it out. You need to maintain that volume, right? As that ball squishes down, it needs to get that correct frame, right? It needs to get that correct pose. Then we're going to spread it out, spread it up, because this is when it's going to start flinging off the surface, right? So let's make that contact right there. Boom. There we go. And already you can see that it feels so much better. We do need to correct this frame in between. And then let's also return this to the default pose. What's the default scale? 0.4. Probably should have frozen my transforms on this. You guys won't have this problem when you're working on like a better rig. This is just like a little custom ball in there. Usually you just return it to like a 1-to-1 scale to make it perfect again. I just needed to see what that value was. But yeah, so there we go. Boom. And now just spice up that drop. Let's talk about arcs and parabolas. You might remember that word from your algebra class. We want basically, as soon as this thing leaves the ground, it's got to be moving on a parabolic shape because the gravity is going to take it over, right? So I want this curve starting from here, because this is the y-axis, y being up and down. I want this to be like a nice curve on both sides, right? And in order to have that, I need to have even timing. Usually I'll just count up the frames. Let's see. So from this one, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames. Makes sense. You got 14 to 20, 6 frames. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'll move it back down to the ground, right? Down to the ground. And let's give it a little bit of leeway there. And let's spread it like this and scale it, right? It's going to be squashing into that ground, right? We need to stretch it out to convey that force. Like it's moving fast at this point in time. So we need to get that across. Now it's going to impact. We already have a squashed down frame. Why don't we just steal that, right? Why don't we just steal that, guys? I'm just going to paste it right there. Boom. We already did the work. Might as well make our workflow a little bit faster, you know? And then I'm just going to fix that contact. Boom. So there we go. So boom. And I feel like the timing's a little bit fast. So let's stretch this out, right? I want to retime this. I want to take this is the height of its jump, right? So I need more time on both sides of that jump. So I'm going to slide it over a few frames. Let's actually count how many frames we're sliding it over. So that's 20 to, let's add 4 frames, right? So 4 frames right there, and then let's add 4 frames to this. So this will be 32 down here. And then again, you can already see it in the graph editor. You have a nice even curve on both sides of that. Boom. Now you're like, Mike, this looks like not as exaggerated. Like, what the hell? I thought you were gonna make this better. So what we got to do is we have a few options. I'll show you the basic way, or like the regular way, and then I'll show you the caveman way that I do it. So you'll notice that whenever you grab one of these tangents, right? Like if I mouse over this and I start left click dragging around, see that? See how it's moving both sides of that tangent? We don't want that because that's going to cause errors on your previous animation. If it gets too like exaggerated, you'll see some flickeriness. So what we need to do is have this tangent and this tangent separated from each other. The button to do that is right here, right? See how they become a dotted line on both sides? Now we can move this up, right? But you'll notice, and you'll notice immediately, get out of here, freaking EA games. Look at that upside of that. Like that's the difference between boring animation on that back half, see that? And stylized, sort of pushed, exaggerated values on that first half. Look at that up, right? That feels so much better than that other one. So we need to do this on the other side as well. I'm actually going to undo that, and I'm going to break this tangent. And I'm going to select both of these tangents at the same time, and then I'm going to... Wait a minute. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Wait a minute. Oh, frick. There we go. So I'm gonna grab both of those and then middle click drag up at the same time. Right there. See how it's moving both of those, and now it's getting us a nice curve right there. Right? So boom. And I think that our scale, like I'd like to maintain that scale of the ball at the top a little bit longer. Let's exaggerate this slightly more, not too much. And let's see that. And then let's go into our scale, right? I want it to maintain that nice, like even scale at the top here for just a little bit longer. Right? Just a little bit longer. So I'm going to set a key right here. And then I'm just going to shift middle click, drag that to the right. So see how it's maintaining that it makes the ball feel a little bit more solid. Let's reduce that a couple frames. Let's do that one more frame. There we go. There we go. That feels a little bit nicer to me. I might want to do one more frame, but it's fine. I'm nitpicking now. But yeah, so that's how you get a nice little ball squash, a little bounce there. We also want to have some bounce in there, but I'm gonna leave that to you guys. I think you guys can do that. Like seeing that top balls sort of settle, how it kind of undulates back and forth. I'll let you guys figure that out. All right, so now torso, working with torsos, right? Whenever we're working with a rig, basically I go up to my options up here. I turn off joints. I don't want to mess with joints ever. You'll break everything and it'll be very sad. I don't want to mess with polys ever as well, like meshes. I don't want to mess with meshes. Now you'll notice that I can't like select anything in here. I'm going to turn off dynamics and what is this? Deformers, I think? Let's see. Wait, what does it say when I mouse over? Yeah, deformers. Yeah, wait, I don't want any deformers in there. I would want this to be selected because without this, you can't animate your camera. And cameras are very important. It's another character that we'll explore in the future. But yeah, so right now, this is usually the setup I have to animate stuff. Question mark, I think, includes locators, so I usually leave that on as well. In case I have to do some like baking or some sort of transferring of animation. And then we have our splines, right? Splines are the big one. That's how like most rigs are controlled. And it looks like I'm selecting the mesh, but it's just because I've made this stupid little guy really fast and in a bad way. But basically some rules when you're animating a torso or a character, right? You select the waist. You animate from the waist because that's like the main point. If you're doing anything beyond like a basic walk or a run cycle, you're also not going to use that main control that comes with the rig at the bottom. You'll see that very commonly on every rig. I find it's a lot easier to get solid foot plants, and your curves make a lot more sense in the graph editor if you animate everything with that waist and like the IK controls, you know, if you move those along with it. That's how it works for me, at least. But yeah, so that top one, let's get like, let's do like a little bit of a lean back, right? I've also changed it so now you're messing with 2 dimensions here. You got blue and red. And so let's do, or I guess you're messing with 3, because I also would like to see a little bit of translate Y on there as well, right? So let's start messing with this, right? I want to kind of get a little bit of, let's do like a lean back, and like let's like rotate back, right? I want like an anticipation frame, right? And then like I want them to kind of like as if they're like busting down a door or something. So let's see. Notice that waist is moving forward. I don't want that. I want that to be a little bit back. I'm gonna hold. See how my manipulator's in the orientation of that object. That's good for a lot of situations, but sometimes you want to move it with like the world axis. See this world axis down there? Let's hold W and left click and do world. And I'm gonna move this back, right? Back and left. And then I'm gonna go down a little bit, and I'm gonna kind of charge through this, like someone's headbutting something, or something's going on, right? So let's do that, sure. And then we can do some settle on there as well. Feel free to move this last key if it's like really inhibiting you somehow. But yeah, so I have a basic pass on my waist, right? Just positionally, not very much rotation on it. There is a little bit, but not much, because what I do is next I animate the top of the waist, right? So I'm gonna check out my keys. I just shift selected that bottom waist, and I'm gonna go to that frame 11, right? And I'm gonna deselect it because I want to just mess with these. I want this to be like this person's getting like ready to push down. I'm gonna have them kind of and then we need the pose. Let's try to match the key. All right, 19, perfect, already on there. Let's try to match this to be like boom. Let's add some twist. So notice that how whenever I'm animating this, like when I want to animate that upper torso, I'm also including the other joints in this, or the other curves in the spine, right? It's because it's very unnatural to just move one piece of that spine, right? Like that looks like it's breaking, right? As you're moving that, it's just like whoever's bones these are just getting crunched up, right? That's no good. That's no good. So, boom, right there. And I feel like we could really change the timing now, right? So let's exaggerate this. Let's squeeze some stuff. And that's why it's good. It's a good idea to try to work out your timing when you have not many kinks. I'm noticing a little bit poppiness in here. See that? Boom. I'm gonna pop. Looks like it's coming from the waist mostly. So let's go in here and let's get some auto tangents on the left and the right side of that. And then you'll notice that, ooh, it comes to this stop. I'm going to harp on you guys all semester about this. Don't just come to a stop like this, right? Since this is just the first tutorial, I didn't think I would be doing like overshoots or anything, but I want to dial it into your guys' heads that doing this is not okay. See how it comes to this stop completely. The rest of the body comes to that stop slowly, which is just great. But that waist, boom, it shows up and then never moves again. Ouch. Yikes. We don't like that around here. We don't like that. So I'm going to add some overshoot, and then I'm going to rotate it back a little bit, you know? Like they're catching the rest of that body. And then notice how it kind of rocks back into that end pose. let's get auto tangents on all of these. It rocks back into that end pose. Let's instead extend this time a little bit, and I'm gonna delete this key. So I just set a key past that. So now it rocks back in more slowly. I'm gonna do like a little dip in here. And it's always a bad sign when I stop talking because I know I'm like getting too in depth into something. But let's see. So it's a little bit, it's not enough. Whoops. Sorry, my hotkeys are not set right now. It's a little bit too much over here, or not enough. And then let's also look at this. I want this to be, let's return to that same pose. So frame 40 is when we need to be there. We can push it to like 43, so that upper body, see how that waist comes to that stop first, and then the upper body follows. I like that a little bit. Let's get on that sway back. There is, I want to get like a little bit of an unfold in there. Like a little bit of an unfold. I feel like I need to resolve this twist earlier though. Like, let's get that twist out of there. Let's get the twist out of this. I might just delete this key because I just want it to nicely interpolate between this and that. But let's get this to be leaning a little bit forward. That's too exaggerated. If you want to decrease like how severe a key is, just make a key in the middle of it, delete that key that was too exaggerated, and then just shift that key over to where it was. And then that returns nice. Let's add a little bit of time there. Let's add a little bit of time. See how I'm like, you have these two keys that are very like small difference between it, and then we can just end that at the same frame, so they'll have a little bit of data on those final movements. Notice that it's even hard to see in this graph editor. I have to like zoom out the key, but yeah, you get that nice smooth out there, and then yeah. I still think the upper torso is a little bit... All right, I'm not going to mess with this anymore. But yeah, so do 2 of those. That's what 3 and 4 are. And then finally, we need an IK-FK switch. All right, so if I ever see you guys have a character's hand rotate onto something and it doesn't switch to IK, you just tell yourself that you are messing up severely and you need to reevaluate your life. No, I'm kidding. But like... honestly, it saves so much, like, it saves so much of a headache, right? Because watch, if I try to have this hand grab, right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to rotate this out. Let's actually put this back into object because I don't want to be rotating on different weird axes. Looks like this rig's locked it off for us, which is great. But let's go into object mode, and I'm going to extend this, and let's get like a nice little hand hold right there, right? Now, of course, you'd have to do the actual like finger position and stuff on here, and let's get this right there. Yeah, so we need to shift this over to that right there. And I don't care much about like the finesse of you getting into that hand position. I just want you getting to that hand position and then not being able to see the IK-FK switch, right? And you're like, Mike, what are you talking about? IK-FK switch? This is insane. I don't know what any of this means. Oh, sorry. Let's also get this not clipping in the ground at the start. But yeah, so observe. See how, like, if I wanted to fix this contact, I'd have to be like, okay, all right, so this frame, this shoulder needs to rotate up a little bit. This needs to rotate in. This shoulder needs to rotate back. Okay, now the elbow needs to rotate back in. Now, okay, this wrist needs to rotate like this. Like that's hell. Don't do that. Don't do that. It looks like garbage too. Look, like see, you can see that hand shifting everywhere, even though you spent like a little bit of time trying to fix that. So let's delete that. what we need to do is switch to a control that doesn't care about the position of this shoulder. It just cares about the position of the wrist, right? So this clavicle is what's driving that motion. And look at the top one carefully. Can you see the difference? It's important that you're able to see the difference so you can tell like what mode your rig is in when you're animating. But you see a difference right around here? Look at the top curves of that forearm and that elbow up here, right? Boom. See that switch? That's the IK-FK switch. Basically, you have two arms in here. Technically, you have three arms. One's the result arm, most likely, depending on how they set it up. But you have the FK, which is just rotation-based, right? It figures out where to put that wrist because you're telling it to be rotated exactly to that spot, all the way up this chain to like even the waist, right? Lots of stuff to figure out there. If you go to your, like, let's go to the frame that we want to swap, right? So let's find the contact frame. That'll be this. Boom, that looks great to me. And then if you go, so 26 is the frame that we're going to swap. And if you go to frame 27, so you go one frame ahead, and set a key, right? This is your arm switch control. Now it's going to be in a different location for a lot of other rigs. They could be like behind the shoulder up here, or it's mostly behind the wrist though. Mostly behind the wrist. What you do is go to the frame before, set a key, and then boom. Just left click that channel name and then slide it all the way to left or the right. See how it's switching IK, FK, IK, FK, IK, FK. Contact, rotations, contact, rotations, contact, rotations. FK is good at rotations. IK is good at contact. Now, I don't want to answer that question a bunch this semester. I probably will have to because IK, FK seems to be a topic that a lot of people get messed up on. But notice that now that switch, that curve, goes from FK all the way to IK from this frame on. That's exactly what we want. Whenever you're doing a contact, like a character grabbing another character, those arms are going to go into IK on that grab. Now, I actually like to animate a lot of things with IK. So I might be in IK earlier than like the exact frame that I'm contacting, but I want you guys to know that you can switch between these to make your contacts better, right? And you'll be like, Mike, I don't know what you're talking about because this I can see when you blend, right? So that's the next part. You have to make this, you need to make this blend clean, right? So I'm going to my frame where I'm contacting, right? Frame 26. And I'm going to create, all right, so here's the Turbo Caveman way, right? You just go into your IK and then you go to frame 27. You go just try to rotate it. You go to the frame before, frame after, and just fix, like, visually match that position, right? Caveman way. Caveman way. I show you this because it works. Sometimes the inverse, the other method won't work for you. You might just need to caveman it. But many of you should be working with rigs that can do IK, FK switching built into the rig somewhere, either with a external script that the tech artist gives you or not, right? So that's the caveman way. Let's actually make this rotation a little bit more gentle. And then let's like rotate it up. Boom. And then let's fix like the position of it. So I'm gonna go here. Normally my hotkeys are set up a little bit better for this, but this will do fine. So let's move this forward. And you're just visually matching it. Like I said, complete caveman method. Please use an alternative. I'm noticing that we have some offsetting here. There we go. It's getting pretty close. But yeah, there you go. Boom. So there you go. To like do it like the correct way, I like to go in and create, and I'm gonna make a locator, right? And remember, I keep this question mark on because this is what lets me like move around locators. This locator, animators use it a lot just to track positions of stuff. So like this contact, this is the contact pose, right? I want that to be recorded. So I'm going to click that locator, shift click that wrist, do modify, match all transforms. Boom. See how it snaps right there? So that snapped it directly to the FK wrist, the one that rotates well but does not do contacts well, right? Now it's the frame where it needed to have switched already. So now I can just click that wrist one and then do modify, match all transforms to that. Boom. Look at that. Look at that. If I turn off NURBS curves with Alt-1, boom. If I just toggle that off, you can't even tell. You can't even tell. Look at that. Boom. So that's how you animate contacts. Like if you're touching a wall, if you're touching a desk, if you're touching anything, like if you're holding onto your own waist, that's going to be an IK, right? And you're going to match it to some sort of like piece of the surface, right? Now we can get into constraints and like point on poly constraints and stuff like that to make like our contacts really perfect in the future. But for right now, this is perfect for us. And that's the last one of the homework. All right. Thanks for watching. Good luck. Lots of stuff to do. I really wish we could have done this in class. But yeah, there you go. That's it. All right. Have a good one.